Welcome back. So we are once again back at it with Isonzo. So last week I dropped a video talking about the ascent event that was going on in Isonzo, and that had us playing Mountaineers. And Mountaineer is not a class that I've put a whole lot of time into, and because of the event, I figured that I would transition that over into the normal gameplay. Traditionally, I've played Assault a lot, but admittedly, I haven't actually played that much Isonzo. It's something that my friends and I picked up around New Year's, and we play it on and off here and there. But it can be a really fun game, especially when I'm looking for something really different to do. It's really nothing like the other games that I play, like Enlisted, for example. Like, yes, you've got bolt-action rifles in both of them, but that's about where the comparison ends. Enlisted is much more of a casual beer and pretzels sort of game, whereas I feel like you're so vulnerable in Isonzo to so many different things that it's a little bit more, I don't know, hardcore is really not the right word, because it is another kind of beer and pretzels-y sort of game. It's not like going and playing, I don't know, like Arma or like Postscriptum, but you do definitely feel very vulnerable to everything around you, and I kind of like that it's a World War I game. I just have a soft spot for World War I. If Enlisted, for example, decided that they wanted to include World War I in their roster, that would make me ecstatic. I would love it so much. There's so much cool stuff that they could do with that. But I digress. This is an Isonzo video. So, essentially what I wanted to do was level up my Mountaineer, because it seemed like they had some pretty neat abilities. They're more of a support class, in my opinion. And to be honest, I'm definitely not playing them optimally, or at least I wasn't at this point. I still had a lot to unlock, though. So, essentially, you start out with your normal bolt-action rifle. There's a few different upgrades that you can get for different, like, bolt-action rifles, or for the two event rifles, for example. They're both single-shot rifles. One of them is bolt-action, single-shot without a magazine. The other one is more of like a turning block, rolling block. I don't know what to call it. But that being said, you get a flare gun, you get binoculars. Well, you have the choice between the two. Like everybody else, you get a shovel, you get your med kit, and you basically head out there and do your thing. So, where the assault class is very much so a frontline, either take territory or hold the enemy off, this is more of a second line class. It's not really who I would normally want to be out in front of everybody, and that's because they can support their officers and their team for that matter, in kind of unique ways. So, assuming that you've never played Isonzo before, there are officers as a class, and those officers can execute support actions, and in order to do that, they need to use flares, and they need to use a table. The thing is, if you're an officer and you're acting alone, then executing that can be time-consuming, because you need to at least get somewhere where you can fire your flare and have it be, you know, beneficial, and then you'd have to go back to your table. Now, when I was starting out, I didn't have that. I just had the binoculars, and the binoculars are a spotting aid, and so basically you can look around and you can hold your, in my case, left click, but I guess if you're on a controller, I imagine it would be left trigger, or right trigger rather, whatever your fire button is. And basically there's a little circle that will fill up, and when it fills up, if you're looking at anybody, they'll be spotted. And it's a relatively narrow area. It's like right in the middle of the binoculars. but that can be an asset to your teammates. Now, once you level up your Mountaineer a little bit, then you get access to the flare gun, and this is where I think their support potential really starts to take off. And essentially, what it allows you to do is launch a flare the same way that your officer would be able to. And the flare does a couple of things. Number one, it allows your officer to call in their support options off of your flare the same way that they would off of their own. And the way the flare gun works, you fire one flare and it spots people wherever it is, and it allows you to call in support options based on it. And then if you fire a second flare, then it'll boost the effectiveness of that. And so most of the time what I would do, because we're, pretty heavily under attack, is I'd pull out my flare gun and I'd fire 2 flares up into the air because, like I said, this is not a very, long life game. This is the kind of game where you can get very unlucky very easily and have your life cut very short. And because of that, I kind of like to pop my flares early. Like, if I was more reliable at staying alive, then that might be a different story. I might actually sit there and use it a little bit more strategically, but at least in the battles that I was in, the enemy was pretty aggressive, and they were hitting us pretty hard. And so it kind of behooved me to just spawn in, fire off my 2 flares, and then go about fighting them. And this was when I only had the flare gun, right? Because, like I said before, you started with the binoculars, you unlock the flare gun. Eventually, I unlocked something else, and that's in my perk tab instead of like an equipment tab. And so you start with light infantry, so you move faster, which that can be nice for getting around the map. But at the second perk level, you get this thing called Observer, and it allows you to build a periscope. And essentially what it is like a tripod with a set of binoculars that are, kind of like a periscope on it. So I think the idea is that you could put it in a trench and peer over the top of the trench. But practically what it does in game is it lets you do what the binoculars do much, much more effectively. So it has the drawback that it's a buildable, so you have to build it, you have to sit there on it, you're honestly more exposed than you might think when you're on it. In a couple of my games, I tried actually putting it in cover, but it doesn't actually, peek up above cover super well unless it's kind of even terrain. I probably got the most use of it sitting on top of a mountain in a different match later on, where I was trying to use it to look down on the enemy while they were charging on a different point. But I digress. Where the normal binoculars allow you mobility, and they have kind of a tight field of view where they spot things, these are the opposite. They have no mobility, it's completely stationary, but it will spot everything on your screen, more or less. There's probably some limitation to it, but it spots everything. So the benefit here is that you can take a Mountaineer out and play very support focused by having your flare gun. So you go out there, you pop your 2 flares, you spot some of the enemy that aren't in your line of sight, you have flares up, so now your officer can call in bombers or artillery or gas or, whatever he wants to use. And then you can sit there and spot all of the enemy as they're showing up, which will put little markers for all of them. And your teammates know exactly where the enemy are, they know exactly where they're coming from. It's a very clear system. It's really nice. You don't have to, tell them, hey, they're coming over that ridge over there on the right, 100 meters down, there's 3 of them. There's just markers. They're already there. It's perfect. Now, I don't have everything unlocked for my Mountaineers. I still have a ways to go, but I've gotten to the point where I have the canteen now, and basically what the canteen does, this is if you wanted to go for more of a rifleman play style, or more of a selfish play style. It lets you reduce the effects of suppression, and it gives you unlimited stamina, similar to Enlisted, where you can just run with it, which can be very useful. And the other 2 that I don't have yet that I'm looking forward to are the Ice Axe, which I believe is a melee weapon. and the bugle, which this is probably what I'm looking forward to more between the two. And basically it gives you an inspiration aura where you can increase bolt action, fire rate, and movement speed for all of your teammates. So kind of also in that support style. I think if you wanted to play like a more supporting role, your choice is between the flare gun and the bugle, and it really just comes down to how your team is playing. Like if you've got a really reliable officer that's, you know, really kicking it with the call-ins, the flare gun might do you a little bit better. But if you don't, and your infantry are, you know, really doing their job well, you might have more luck with the bugle. But we'll see. We'll see when I unlock it. It might take me a bit to get there. And then as far as perks go, I now have Alpinist, which gets you faster vaulting and climbing speed. And basically my thought was, going back to the Alpine event, I might be able to use that and just scale up the mountain a lot faster. I just haven't been back into that game mode with this perk since I unlocked it, but I imagine it probably helps quite a bit. But there's two more perks that I'll get eventually. One of them increases the duration of spotted enemies, which honestly could be really useful, but in order to get that, you have to give up the periscope, and I feel like the volume of spots you can get with the periscope might outweigh that. But I guess if you were working as a dedicated sniper team, then you could take spotter with your binoculars and mark targets for somebody that you're working with, like a machine gun or a sniper, something like that, and that might be useful. You also get access to sniper, and that just increases your zoom while holding breath, but I don't think that's something I would really get a whole lot of use out of. If I was going full infantry, I'd probably go light infantry and then take the canteen. But as far as support, I like the flare gun. I think the bugle has potential, and I do really like the periscope. I know it's kind of vulnerable, and sometimes when I'm using it, I feel like I'm not particularly useful. I was sitting there using it at one point, and I thought to myself, man, a bot could do my job. But at the same time, having played other classes in this game, I also recognize just how valuable it is to have red dots or triangles or whatever they are near people. Like, there are so many times when people just show up next to you and you're not expecting them because you're fighting somebody in a different direction, and if they have to cross any amount of open ground where this periscope can see them, it marks them. And I can imagine that that's so useful to people that are a little bit further up, that are like stuck in. As far as the guns go, it kind of depends on, you know, which nation you are. They're basically all just different rifles. I mean, I'm excited to get all of them, but, you know, at the end of the day, there isn't a ton of difference between the various ones. I don't know which one I'd really be the most excited for. I mean, the Gewehr 1898 for the Germans is probably going to be pretty cool. Same with the 7184. The Machado cavalry, I think the Austrians and the Germans get that. That should be pretty good. As far as the Italians go, probably the repeater Stutzen M95. I imagine that'll be pretty decent. Other than that, there's not really a whole lot else with this class. That's most of the highlights, but bear in mind, I'm only at like level 7 with them, and I feel like I've got a decent amount of the class unlocked, but there's 20 levels worth of unlocks for them. You don't get things at every level. I think it's like 1, 3, 5, 10, 12, 15, 18, and 20. But this is probably the next class that I'll end up capping. After that, I'm not sure who I'll look at next. I probably should try to play around with the officers more, but I don't know. I feel like the officer's fun, but they don't really get stuck in, and I like getting stuck in. I might try the engineer next. I don't know. I'm sure that the rifleman's probably fantastic. It's just, it's a rifleman. I tend to avoid the like basic classes in games, and either I go for like really aggressive classes, or I go for, I don't know, I guess more supporting classes. Just something that brings something to the table that's more valuable than Joe average. But that's just me. There's probably some cosmetics and whatnot that I can unlock too. But yeah, I like Isonzo. It's a fun game. It definitely breaks up the event grind with, say, Enlisted. I've been trying to shake things up lately. So let me know what you think down below. Have you been playing Isonzo at all? Have you leveled your Mountaineers, or do you prefer something else? I'm sure somebody's going to tell me the sacrilege that I just spoke against the mighty rifleman. I understand. The rifleman is the, what's the quote? Is it the queen of battle or the king of battle? One of them's artillery, the other one's the infantry. I don't remember. Anyway, get out there, kick ass, take names, and win your games.
This next me potkasin mennä!